There is nothing like an old European stone wall. But there are times that it is just not practical to use natural stone. Atmosphyre has made it possible to achieve an authentic, European-looking stone wall, which only adds about 1 inch to the thickness of the wall. This video will cover how to install this product to achieve the look of a real antique stone wall.
We've been designing, remodeling, and building homes for over 20 years. And you have seen products like this or finished like this achieved using genuine old limestone and those types of things. But to find something that is lighter weight, easier to work with, more cost effective, quite frankly, and the efficiency of the installation, this was hands down, bar none, the best product to work with.
In order to achieve the desired look, the installation steps must be followed as closely as possible. We recommend that you put down 6mm plastic on your floors for protection. Then a layer of plywood that is about 24 inches wide on top of the plastic. There are over 30 different panels and they are all numbered. So be sure to keep the same number panels at a distance from each other. You can also turn them upside down so that it breaks up the pattern. In order to create a natural stone look, the placement of the first row of stone panels is important. We want to offset the panels enough so that the eye cannot detect a continuous seam line. You want to cut the bottom off of each tile so that they are different heights. You do not need to cut every panel, but just every 3, and then a full tile again. We recommend that you stagger the joints by about 2 inches. Be sure to put the cut side of the panel facing down for installation. You want to make all your cuts for your bottom row before you mix your thin set. You can use a wet saw or a diamond blade in a grinder for cutting the panels. If you are installing on painted drywall or new drywall, you want to first prime the walls with a tile primer, such as Laticrete Prime and Bond, or a similar product. Follow the instructions for their installation process carefully. This process usually requires you to roll on a coat of primer 15 minutes to 1 hour before you start applying the thin set and tiles to the wall. For applying the thin set, you want to use a 1/4 inch square notched trowel. You want to only use a latex fortified thin set. Follow the manufacturer's instructions for adding water and mixing. Apply the thin set to the wall using the notched trowel. Only cover the amount of wall that you can comfortably cover with panels. Thin set should not sit for more than 5 minutes before installing a panel into it. Start with your first row and install your way up to the ceiling. Let the thin set set up and cure for at least 24 hours before applying the mortar. The mortar application is quite critical for this product to have the look we are hoping for. The key to a successful install of the mortar is to have the mortar face or mortar surface either at the same plane as the face of the stone or even further out from the stone. You will mix your thin set that we have provided per the instructions in the boxes of mortar. Once you have your mortar mix ready, you will apply it with a tile grout applicator. Do not mix more mortar than 1 box of mortar for 1 person. This box of 20 pounds of mortar will cover about 7 panels. For 1 box of mortar, you want to add 44 fluid ounces, or 2.85 pounds of water. For mixing the mortar, you want to start with approximately 75% of the required water. During 3 to 5 minutes of initial mixing, add remaining water. Let the mortar rest for 2 minutes and then remix for at least 1 minute. You want to add small amounts of mortar to the spaces between the stones and push it into the keys to get it to hold. Work your way up from one location and spread out from there. Once you have filled the area between the stones, you will want to scrape off the excess mortar on the top of the stones. In much of the installation, the stone tops will be covered, and you will need to use your finger to feel for the edges of the stones. Installers use blue tape on the face of the stone to help them see the stone. This look is an antique stone wall look, and it is perfectly acceptable to bury a few stones. So do not worry if you think you missed uncovering a few stones. Once your mortar is covering the area of the stone, you can use your finger to feel for the outline of the stone. Then you can scrape away the mortar on top of the stone. Use a tile sponge cut in half to smooth out the mortar with the edge of the stone face. Then rinse your tile sponge in water and wring out the excess water. Use the sponge to tamp the mortar flat and remove scraping marks. Then clean the face of the stone off, just in the center area, trying not to expose the edges of the stone. This process requires that you constantly adjust the mortar and cleaning the stone until you have no stone edges revealed, and an area in the center of the stone that is cleaned off. Once you find a stone and find the edges, you can remove the excess mortar with a sponge or a hand broom. The key to a successful finishing is making sure that you keep the edges of the stones hidden and taper the mortar onto the face of the stone. By using the technique of scraping and tamping, you can get each stone to look just right. When your mortar is built up too much, you can scrape it down with your fingers or the sponge. You can move high mortar areas over to fill in lower areas near the stone with the sponge, either by scraping it over or tamping the sponge. You can smooth out the mortar with a hand broom as well as a sponge. Be sure to tamp over the brush marks with a sponge to make sure that you remove all brush marks. Use as little water in your sponge as possible, as excess water will lighten the color of the mortar once it cures. Once you have completed an area, do not touch the mortar, as that will leave dark areas in the mortar. Do not touch or add water to the mortar that has been installed once you have finished cleaning the stone finish and touching up the mortar around it. This can cause the mortar to be a much darker color later. The mortar color will not be to its final shade until 4 days after it is installed. It will be much darker for the first 48 hours. If you have any questions about this product, you can contact us from our website. We would be glad to answer any questions that you have.